Theresa May has today published an article in the Sunday Express which, to my eyes, looks a carbon copy of the promises she made on this programme at the beginning of the year, identifying mental health care provision as an area of concern. Since January, what has she done?
Well, at the beginning of the year, as you know, she made it very clear that one of her priorities is to put mental health on the same footing as physical health in terms of the parity of esteem and the way in which people who suffer mental health get treated. And we've done a great deal to try to start implementing that promise. So this last week, Paul Farmer, who's the Chief Executive of Mind, the mental health charity, and Lord Stevenson, who's been a mental health campaigner in the House of Lords, published a report that was commissioned by the Prime Minister to encourage businesses and organisations, starting with the NHS and the civil service, to provide much greater awareness, support and commitment to help people with mental health conditions in the workplace.
And when those recommendations are implemented and have had time to bed in, we'll have you back on the show and we can discuss them. But literally, from the beginning of this year, what improvements have you made to mental health care provision?
So we've made a commitment on the finances. We increased the money spent on mental health last year by over £500 million. We have a commitment to invest over £1 billion over the next 4 years. We've published the mental health workforce plan to help deliver improvements to achieve many of the targets that we've also added into the mental health system. So we're planning 21,000 additional posts in mental health over the next 4 years, as well as setting targets for psychosis, for children being seen in a way that, well, psychosis will be the first country in the world to have set a target for 6 weeks of access to talking therapies.
I mean, it isn't as if the NHS has just woken up to the idea of a lack of mental health care provision. 23% of NHS activity goes towards mental health, just 11% of the budget. So extra money is fantastic, great, all the rest of it. But, it's a drop in the ocean next to that which is required.
Well, as I've said, we're increasing the funding going into mental health services by about 10% in real terms over the course of the next few years.
Just on that point, though, but isn't the NHS budget due to rise by 0.7% next year, which actually, in real terms, is a cut?
No, it's going to go up by, in real terms, per capita over this year. So we've pledged that quite clearly in our manifesto, and we're increasing by £8 billion over the course of the Parliament. And over the last 2 years, it's gone up by 5%. So there has been a significant increase in resources. We're obviously just ahead of the budget, and we'll see what that will mean for coming years through the budget discussions. But I think the priority being given to mental health...
No one would deny that the government is finally starting to get to grips with mental health, or at least trying to get to grips. But two measures from the Care Qualities Commission show that, since 2010, this government really has taken its eye off the ball. The number of people who had to travel outside their own area for mental health care rose between 2014-15 and 2015-16 by 40%. The number of detentions under the Mental Health Act has risen by a fifth in 2 years. I mean, up till this point, would you concede that you've got it wrong on mental health?
As you know, we've had a number of challenges and priorities to deal with over the last few years. I think the focus following the Mid-Staffs report in 2012 was that we've got had some real patient safety issues across our hospitals in physical health, and there was a priority given to raising staff levels of nurses in particular on our wards, which have gone up by close to 11,000 since 2010, and mental health was one of the areas which saw a reduction during that period in nurses, and that's what we're now trying to put right. It does take time. It takes time to train people to undertake these very challenging roles, and that's why we're committing both the resource and the workforce plan to recruit more therapists, more doctors, more nurses into the mental health community.
Well, let's speak more generally about the NHS as a whole for a second. And, I mean, you raised the matter of staffing there. I mean, it appears that you've got some very real problems. It's great that you are looking to secure people for these positions, but you don't appear to be finding them. NHS England in March, 30,600 full-time equivalent positions advertised. That's up from 26,000 just the year before. I mean, the problems in terms of staffing within the health service are not getting better. On your own metrics, they're getting worse.
Well, no, I think what I point you to is the requirements for more staffing to make sure that our hospital wards are safe. And that's one of the reasons why last month the Secretary of State made it very clear that he wants to increase the number of nurses in training for the NHS of the future by a record amount, by 25%, starting next year. So there will be more than 5,000 additional training places for nurses, on top of the additional 25% increase in doctor training posts, which were announced the year before. So we absolutely recognise we need more staff in our hospitals, in primary care, helping cope with the growing demand that we have from an ageing population.
I mean, it does strike sometimes that whenever we talk about the health service, no matter the political hue of the individual that we talk to, it's always about what we're going to do going forward, not about what has happened up to this point. I mean, can we just dwell for a second on targets within the NHS? I mean, they are now failed en masse across the service. In 2012-13, 86% of time-related targets were hit. That fell to 0% in 2016-17.
We are under considerable pressure in the NHS at the moment because of growing demand as a result of the ageing population, the fact that we're living longer with more complex conditions. Nobody's trying to deny that or hide that. What we have to do is to ensure that we've got more people coming into the system to provide the care that's so urgently needed, and look at the way in which we provide care. One of the comments that the Chief Medical Officer for NHS England, Sir Maurice Keogh, was talking about today was to ensure that we have one of the safest systems in the world. That's the ambition of the Secretary of State. That's one of the reasons why we've set up the Healthcare Safety Investigations branch, in order to provide greater ability for the health service across the country to react when things go wrong and learn from mistakes. So it's a combination of providing more financial resource, more human resource, and doing things better and more safely in order to try and get better outcomes for patients. That is the objective.
Mr Dunne, I wonder if we might move on to allegations of abuse in and around the Palace of Westminster. We're told via the Sunday Times that the Prime Minister is receiving a weekly briefing on the indiscretions of her backbenchers. Should that information be made public?
I think that's a report which I don't recognise. I think what the Prime Minister has done today is to ask the Cabinet Office to investigate whether or not allegations that have been made about a colleague are in breach of the ministerial code.
You worked in the Whip's office. You worked in the Whip's office for a length of time, Mr Dunne. You're not telling me that the Whips don't have information on their backbenchers that they then use to get them to vote in a particular way?
You're right. I was in the Whip's office, and when I was in the Whip's office, it was very clear that anything in the Whip's office stays in the Whip's office. There are allegations made about colleagues from across parties, or that there are allegations made about colleagues of all kinds of things, which come to the attention of the Whip. Some of them are true, some of them may not be true. And
they should be the arbiter of whether or not it's true. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we appear to have gone through the looking glass here. There are allegations being made to the Whip's office that they sit on and they arbitrate upon.
No. What I was going on to say is that if there are any allegations of inappropriate behaviour or illegal behaviour, clearly they get acted upon. What the Prime Minister has also done today is to write to Speaker Bercow to ask him to set up a cross-party, a parliamentary procedure to enable members of staff who feel that they've been harassed or bullied to have a place to go which is independent of their employer. And I think that's entirely appropriate, and we need to get on and put that in place.
I mean, you seem sorry to interrupt, Mr Dunne, but we're coming to the end of our time. But you appear to be making the same point that Owen Paterson made a few moments ago, which is that there is a difference between improper behaviour and illegal behaviour. So I just want to ask you a few kind of yes-no questions. I mean, would you ever send explicit sexual texts to someone who'd applied for a job in your office?
Do you know what? I think that's a completely inappropriate question. Of course, the answer is no, but I don't think we should be going down.
I think it's completely inappropriate behaviour, and Mr Cramp has admitted to it.
It is completely.
Would you ever send your parliamentary staff to go and buy sex toys for you?
This is not somewhere where I'm prepared to get into these conversations. Of course I don't do that. I have never done that kind of activity, and I don't condone it. But I don't think that it's appropriate to have sort of trial by media trying to pin allegations until they're proven.
It's not trial by media. The latter allegation has been admitted. Look, where in the ministerial code is that kind of behaviour covered?
Well, if it's not covered in the code needs to be revised. I accept that.
I just want to pick up on comments made by Michael Gove yesterday, because in terms of the egregiousness spectrum, those were pretty much at the far end. I mean, his joke, sometimes I think that coming into the studio with you, John Humphreys, is a bit like going into Harvey Weinstein's bedroom. You just pray that you emerge with your dignity intact. The Environment Secretary there saying that women who have been abused have had suffered through no fault of their own, a degradation in their own dignity.
Yes, I don't think that it's appropriate to make light of these kinds of sexual harassment claims regarding public figures. I think I agree, it's not appropriate.
The problem is, though, Mr Dunne, is that when these things happen, a full apology is issued, we simply move on and we're supposed to forget about it. But it is illustrative, isn't it, that you had not just the Environment Secretary, but the former leader of the Labour Party, Lord Kinnock, weighing in as well, making jokes at a time when the spotlight is on everyone in public life around allegations of impropriety.
I think the spotlight in this country has been on people in public life since the exposures about Jimmy Savile took place. And I think all organisations need to look at themselves and how they conduct themselves when they're speaking to the public in wherever it happens to be, whether it's in politics or
Mr.
ordinary
Dunne,
organisations.
I'm so sorry, but we have to leave it there.